And folks, welcome to our next big adventure, the title of which may be different than what you've written down. I've played with different titles and I may change it 15 times, but bear with me. Currently it is, What Have I Become? What have you become? What are we? What are we made of? These are some of the things we will explore as we go on our next big adventure, kind of looking at the tiny things that make life, the tiny things that affect us in our environment. We're going down, down, down to the tiny things like atoms and molecules. This starts with problems. We're using our problems just like we always do, and our problems are three. And we have problem number one. It's what's happening inside our bodies when we're healthy. So when things are going well, what is happening? What are these little atoms and molecules that we get from our environment? What's going on inside our bodies when they're there? How do they interact with our cells and our organs? Problem number two is what's happening inside our bodies when we fail to survive. So when things from our environment go into us and harm us, what's happening? Or what things in our environment might poison or harm our health? And then that leads into our third problem, continuing our research and exploration of the environment, environmental issues. Problem number three says, how do toxin or pollution affect our bodies? We will be exploring this for quite some time, but this is our first opportunity to really kind of look at what atoms, molecules, or materials are affecting our bodies and really start exploring what's happening internally. We know that, climate change is affecting organisms, but why? But how does the climate or the environment affect things? We're really going to start looking on the inside. We're going to look at how the environment gets into us through what we breathe, what we eat, and absorb. All right, that's slide number two. As always with our problems, these are guiding ideas or mysteries, things we'll explore and give focus to our adventure with What Have I Become? Kicking off this new section of What Am I or What Have I Become, we are going to learn kind of a new activity that is perfectly suited for our science class. It's called SOU, and it helps us do a lot of things that scientists do. And so let's look at this. This is slide three. It says scientific practices. Everything scientists do are here. They argue, they ask questions, they identify problems, they create models, they investigate, collect and analyze data, they perform mathematics, and provide explanations. These are things that we have already done within our own class just in the past 10 weeks, and I'm proud of that, and I hope you're proud of it too. Continuing with this, though, is activities that help us do more of it, and that's the SOUs. And we'll talk about what that is, but you can see the SOUs allow us to do most of these scientific skills. The one it seems excluding is mathematics, maybe someday, but you can see they allow you to do all the ones that are highlighted in pink. We are going to do an activity in class, so slide 3 and 4 will be referencing in class, don't worry. But it's going to be learning about carbon, the element, the atom, and how it moves throughout the environment and how it's played a role in climate change. And that fits really perfectly in with what we've been doing. But we'll kind of look at the carbon cycle and how humans have gotten kind of in the middle of the carbon cycle as far as how we live our life and how we use carbon. The statement of understanding I was referencing is what we're going to use to explore this simulation. And here's a link to it right here. We'll be collecting data from it, but not yet. A little later we'll do that. Maybe in 3 to 5 days from now. But today what we're going to do is just practice using this statement of understanding. The statement of understanding is ultimately you writing what you understand, or you stating what you understand. You can see it has this big section here overall. It has a place for name. It starts with a problem. And this problem is what is happening in the atmosphere to cause global warming. So carbon is involved in global warming, and so this will be our first chance to kind of explore that. Anytime we do this kind of activity, it always starts with a worksheet that looks just like what you're looking at now. And what you're going to do is you're going to look at first just the simulation overall. we'll just try to collect some information as much as we can from it. That'll be our observations, or what's happening. In this situation, it looks like we'll work together as a team since we've done it for the first time. And we'll, together as a class, we'll collect 7 observations. We may share some observations between each other. That's a big part of this activity, is also allowing us to share information or share observations. We'll use this information to create a hypothesis. And this hypothesis will be us stating something that we think is a good answer to this problem right here. So after we take some observations, we should feel a little more comfortable saying what is happening in the atmosphere to cause global warming. Now we may not, but the goal is to have a hypothesis that seeks to explain this scientific problem above. Again, when you have a scientific problem and you have some information or some knowledge you gain from these observations, you then generate a hypothesis. And then down below, it asks you this. It says, what can you now say about the carbon dioxide gas molecule as it moves throughout Earth's systems? So what we're going to be doing is using our observations combined with the hypothesis we created and thinking about this problem and write a statement of understanding. Here's what a class did, and this is slide 7, did maybe a year or 2 ago. And you can see there's 7 full observations, a hypothesis they generated, and then in class overall we created a statement using evidence or observations in our writing, and also kind of how did we come to our hypothesis or our answer to the original scientific problem. How did we answer that, or how do we think we know a little more about it? What can we say about it? Well, that's the statement of understanding. This is the statement of understanding. And we'll work on it more in class, but this is a strategy and activity we'll do for the rest of the year. And we'll practice it, we'll get much better at it. It'll take us less and less time. But it's a great way for us to really do some discovery on our own. And this worksheet just kind of guides us through gathering information, data, observations, and writing about it. Just a brief reference to what the simulation looks like. And you can see it allows us to plot data. It'll graph the data for us. We'll be measuring how fossil fuels are used over a period of time. And you can see that these gray boxes kind of represent little areas, amounts of carbon dioxide or carbon, either located in the ground, at the surface, in plants, in our atmosphere, or in our oceans. And we'll see how amounts of carbon change from one area to the next as we use fossil fuels. And spoiler alert, when we use fossil fuels, carbon is involved. All right. Here we have slide 8, and slide 8 has a really interesting model that a scientist has created, and it turns an organism, a human or an animal, into what looks like an opening for things to go in and an opening for things to go out. And if you look, compare the things going in to the things going out. It says, interpret the model of the organism above. So we see that the organism has different parts and has an opening where things go in. These are going in as well. And then you see the opening where things go out. Try your best to explain this in your own words. That's one task. So slide 8 has an activity to do, and it says explain image using food and molecules. And then it says number 3, why aren't molecules entering the same as those that are leaving? So why do you think what goes in isn't the same as what comes out? So you can create a hypothesis. What do you think? I think blank. Why do you think this is not coming out here? Because this goes in, something else comes out. So why do you think that is? So go ahead and generate a hypothesis based on what you've seen here and you've observed the model. Why do you think? So let's make a confident hypothesis to explain your thoughts. We have slide 9, and you can see it's in a pink box, so it's something we want to write down. And it says living and non-living objects are composed of the same basic building blocks, materials, particles, and these are called atoms or equal atoms. So whether it's a rock that's broken down into smaller pieces, you'd eventually get to individual atoms. Same as a tree, it's a living organism. break it down more and more. You get to cells right here, and you keep going, and eventually you get down to individual little molecules like water. This is a protein, alanine, and then we got a glucose molecule here. And you can see that even those molecules can be broken down further into nitrogen, oxygen, carbon, and hydrogen, but atoms. So the tree can be broken down to, eventually at a very smallest way, it's broken down into atoms, just like a non-living thing like rock. So whether it's living or non-living materials, they're all composed of atoms. Make sure for slide 9 here that you get this important kind of definition sentence. Slide 10 is an exploration of looking up close to things, getting a closer look into the design, the structures, what makes parts of organisms or the materials around us. Take a moment to explore these beautiful photos and see, these are called macroscopic photos because they show the smaller things in a very macro or big way. See if you can figure out what each thing is. Slide 11, we zoom in even closer, and these start showing like cellular or single-celled organisms. See if you can figure out what some of these are, but these are different forms of single-celled organisms. Zoomed in with different technologies, special microscopes that allow you to see even single cells. Slide 13 goes even further, and you can start seeing even smaller than the cellular level of materials. You can see how molecules start forming individual structures, like in this piece of frost. Slide 13 gets down to the finally atomic level, the smallest level. So we went from looking at the tiny features of a big organism, then looking at the cells or single-celled creatures that can make an organism, and then finally you look even to what makes the cells, which are the atoms or the molecules. This is a molecule scanned by a special microscope. This is a glucose molecule. This molecule is spiral shaped, the double helix, that's right, it's DNA. Special microscopes, very expensive ones, allow people to view atoms or molecules. Not easy technology to come by. Perhaps for a little bit of research you can investigate when those type of microscopes were invented. I'm curious to know how long they've been around. You can see scientists have even taken individual atoms and move them around using the microscope to form silly structures or a brand name. And believe it or not, this shows individual metal atoms that make up the very fine tip of a needle. This is the tip of a needle that has been scanned or viewed through a special microscope, and you can actually see that even though to the naked eye it looks very, very sharp, under a microscope that can identify individual atoms, you can see it looks really blunt and not sharp at all at that level. Here we have slide 14. Slide 14 is kind of fun. It shows different forms of art where artists have been inspired to draw based on how they see atoms and molecules and the tiny particles that make matter. So they draw basically imagining all the atoms or molecules that make what we see. Some of these paintings are famous, and this one's the digital based on pixels and how teeny little pixels make the bigger picture. But the idea is that tiny particles make everything around us, things so small we can't really see with our own eye. Your job is to do just like they've done and to draw an image composed of dots or atoms. The dots will represent atoms, but draw any kind of picture, whether it's complex or not, and just go for it, have fun with it. And that's slide 14. Alright, this is slides number 1. I'll move on to slides number 2, where we'll pick up and start slide 15. So, good luck, have a great day.